Heroes of France. We're going all over the country of France to introduce and maybe to acquaint ourselves with some really fantastic, notable brands. And Clarke Boehling is on the Zoom with us, and Clarke has been a guest before. He is the grower liaison for Rosenthal, and he's really good at this. So, Clarke, thank you for joining us and talking to us about Château Simone, a brand that you're affiliated with. And I'd love to learn more about, because this is just such a cool addition to our event. And I think everyone's going to really enjoy learning about a Provence red, which I think a lot of people maybe haven't even had the experience of tasting before.
Well, thanks, Ian. Thanks for the kind words, and it's good to be back and hanging out and talking about our wines with you. Chateau Simone is one of my very favorite producers in our portfolio, and there's so many facets of Chateau Simone which are completely unique and singular to them. It's actually hard to know where to start, but I'll just kind of give a brief rundown of who they are, where they are, and why they're special. Um, the estate itself is about 200 years old. They started in 1830, and it's been generation after generation of the Rougier family, the current generation of which is Jean-Francois Rougier, who you'll see pictured in the slideshow here. Um, what's really special about Simone is sort of their location. So within the larger Provence, as with all French wine regions, you have a lot of variety of terroir and soil and elevation and exposition. They occupy this very, very tiny little appellation called Palette. And Palette is very, very close to the city of Aix-en-Provence, a fairly large city. And it's kind of disarming when you visit Simone, because if you start off in Aix-en-Provence, you drive not even 15 minutes outside of town and you reach this dense forest with the gate to Chateau Simone. And as you wind your way up the really long pathway through the forest, and then you reach a break in the forest, all these things matter in the ultimate character of Simone, because north-facing vineyards get less intense sunlight than south-facing vineyards. And a lot of places in France, they prize southern-facing vineyards because they get the best and the most quantity of sunlight. But in the south, and especially with the changing climate, this north-facing situation that Simone has is a blessing.
Mm.
It keeps the wines balanced and fresh, even in a hot vintage like we've been having lately, especially in the white wine, but a little bit in the red as well. You have these notes that are really, really pine resin like.
Mm.
And I don't think it's the case that like the pine is somehow getting into the wine, but you find this in a lot of areas where the vegetation that grows in close proximity to the vines themselves, there's some sort of influence of flavor, and it's really unmistakable.
Mm.
Um, the vines at Chateau Simone too, this is a really unique situation. So um, the vineyards were planted right after phylloxera in the late 1800s, and quite a few of the vines are still producing fruit. So we're talking vines now that are up to 130 or so years old, which are some of the oldest vines still producing fruit to be found in France. And within the property, which is 20 hectares or about 50 acres, you have a huge variety of red and white grape varieties. Some of them you don't even really see outside of Chateau Simone much. Some of them are virtually extinct. So you have this situation of vineyards. It's kind of like a museum in a lot of ways. And rather than being a single grape variety's expression, the wines of Château Simone encompass all these different varieties, and they're all picked together, pressed together, fermented together. So their terroir really gets voiced with all this nuance instead of just being, you know, a Grenache or, what have you. Um, and that really adds to the character of Simone as well. Another thing that's incredible about Simone is that they have, through all the changes in French viticulture, through all the technology, through all the history, the 20th century, all the tumult of that, they have stayed the course in how they make their wine. They've always made the wine in the exact same way. And, even though now they have an electric pressoir that slowly lowers the pressing unit onto the grapes instead of a manually cranked one, all the ideas behind the wine are the same. The cellar is the same. The microbial life within the cellar is the same. So you can taste a bottle of Chateau Simone from the 40s or 50s, and it's the same mentality and same process, same vines in a lot of cases that's produced in the 2000s.
Mm.
Um, and so it's really rare in French wine and any kind of wine to have this sort of through line of history and how the wine is made. The vineyards have never been sprayed with chemicals, so they've been organically run the whole time. They kind of never um, went down the path of least resistance and started spraying to make their lives easier. They've always worked the land, worked the soil, and done things in the kind of tried and true agrarian, pre-technological, pre-chemical way. So really, in so many ways, Chateau Simone is a unique property and a unique wine.
Coming in around $80 a bottle for the 2019. We're going to taste that with our crew right now. But yeah, I was fascinated when I saw the grape composition. There are some grapes I've never heard of before.
And I think it speaks to their mentality as well, that those vines are still active. And even if they're not very productive because they're so old, they consider them important.
So, question for you: have you heard any of these arguments about, you know, the essence of terroir may not be because the vine is taking up the minerality, you know, with its roots and pulling that information from the roots, but it's actually more of the yeast that's in the vineyard, and that
I
may.
think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that we have sort of evolved and adopted this really simplified way of looking at terroir as it's something that literally transfers from soil into a vine. And I think there's so much more going on than that. There's the way that water is uptaken into the vine. And I think there's a lot of processes that we just don't fully understand. And certainly yeast plays an enormous role. And that's something we should talk about too with Simone, because they've had the same cellar forever and they've always allowed the fermentations to proceed spontaneously. So they have this robust yeast population in their cellar, that the wines just ferment perfectly every year and they never have to do a thing to it. And it's the same group of yeasts in the cellar and the same population in the vineyards because they don't spray chemicals onto the vines in the grapes, and reduce that yeast population that way. So, you know, all in all, yeah, I think you could take Chateau Simone and somehow replicate their whole situation somewhere else, but the yeasts would be different. And so the wine would be different and everything. And so that's part of the magic of it, I believe. Chateau Simone will bring a familiar note while being completely unique in its own thing as well, I think.
Tremendous. Great to see you again. Thanks for your time and expertise. And until we talk again,
Thanks for having me, Ian. My
thank
pleasure.
take care.
Take care.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.